I think you'll find, sir, that there will come a time when black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves. Then the black man will think like a black man, and he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together. And then at that point, you'll have a situation where when you attack one black man, you are attacking all black men. And this type of black thinking will cause all black people to stick together.
Number 41, Beta Israel and the Qemant people. To further solidify the conclusion that the Israelites are a black, Negro, and African people, we must dive into the continent of Africa for evidence for this claim. Finding any lingual connections, Hebraic traditions, artifacts, oral history, and many other pieces that can help us build a picture of who the Israelites really were, and if they were in fact in Africa. A perfect group to begin this study of proof for possible Israelite heritage and culture are the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, also known as the Falasha Jews. The Beta Israel's traditions, geographic location, and historical records suggest they are a remnant of the biblical Israelites. Their practices, historical migrations, and geographical location provide compelling evidence for their connection to the ancient Israelites of the Bible. Let's dive in. But first, we need to talk about the land they live in, Ethiopia itself. Ethiopia is home to the Ethiopic canon, which includes the oldest known versions of many biblical texts. The Gaius Bible, used by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, predates the European translations and includes books like 1st Enoch, Jubilees, and others, which are crucial to understanding Israelite history. This further underscores Ethiopia's deep ties to biblical traditions. Ethiopia was also one of the first nations to adopt Christianity officially as early as the 4th century under King Ezana of Aksum. The Beta Israel's proximity to this early Christian kingdom is significant, as many Beta Israel members who converted to Christianity became known as the Falasha Mura. Located around the area of Lake Tana, the source of the Blue Nile, the Beta Israel's homeland is in northern Ethiopia, a region rich in biblical and historical significance. This area aligns closely with the journey of the Israelites during the Exodus, especially considering the location of the Yam Suf, or Sea of Reeds, as part of the Nile region.
Again, there's no doubt about that, because Moses' mother placed his basket amongst the reeds, same word. Not among the reds, the reeds.
It is highly plausible that remnants of the Israelite tribes settled in this area after their exodus from Mizraim, better known as Egypt.
They then followed the Nile River system. They did not go north through a hostile Egypt. They went south. And the Nile, of course, divides into two branches, the Blue Nile and the White Nile. The White Nile rises in Uganda. The Blue Nile rises in Lake Tana in Ethiopia. And Lake Tana in Ethiopia is the center, the absolute center of the area in which the Ethiopian Jews live.
Wow.
And suddenly it all began to make sense.
I will be making a full-length documentary proving without a doubt that northern Ethiopia is indeed the place the Israelites settled. So subscribe to me on Patreon for updates and behind the scenes. Anyway, the Beta Israel once thrived in the legendary 4th century Kingdom of Simeon, an autonomous region in the Simeon Mountains of northern Ethiopia, which was independent for over 1,000 years and was the second most powerful African empire for 300 years. This kingdom maintained distinct Israelite traditions, resisted conversion to Christianity and Islam, and preserved their unique identity despite external pressures. I'm sure you notice the similarity of this powerful kingdom located on mountains, just like the biblical description of Jerusalem. Their existence in the same geographical area where the Israelites are believed to have sojourned adds weight to their connection to biblical history. The Beta Israel refer to themselves as Esra Elawi, literally meaning Israelites, a term that directly connects them to the biblical Israelites. Furthermore, they are one of the few communities historically known to maintain Nazirite traditions, such as vows of abstinence from wine, cutting hair, and strict dietary practices, echoing biblical commands. Another one of the key distinctions of the Beta Israel is their non-Talmudic tradition. Unlike Rabbinic Judaism, which relies heavily on the Talmud rather than strictly the Torah, the Beta Israel practice a form of Torah-centered belief that closely aligns with the Hebrew Bible. They do not follow the oral traditions codified in the Talmud or other post-biblical texts, making their practices unique among Judaic groups. The Beta Israel also maintain numerous practices and beliefs that mirror biblical Israelite traditions, including strict observance of the Sabbath from evening to evening, adherence to the dietary laws outlined in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, a holding of the Ark of the Covenant in high regard, which is a practice shared with Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity, suggesting shared origins, and a hereditary priesthood claiming descent from the tribe of Levi, called the Kohanim. To put the final nail in the coffin that these are legitimate descendants of the biblical Israelites, there are Beta Israel Ethiopian monks that hold artifacts from the time of Solomon's temple, and I'll show you.
These items to be taken with them to Axum. They were actually abandoned and left with the monks on Tanakirkos. Okay, the monks have brought this bronze, very corroded bowl out. They call this a gomer. They say that they put blood in this during the blood sacrifices and that someone would stir it to keep the blood from coagulating. It was used in the blood sacrificial services. They tell me that this bowl came from Solomon's temple. That's true. This would be the only known implement from Solomon's temple to exist in the world today that can be verifiable.
The monks brought out a pair of ancient meat forks and said they came from Solomon's temple with the ark. The monks explained that these meat forks were used to put large pieces of meat on the fire in the burnt offering sacrifice. Each fork was topped with the budding almond symbol, one Bob had seen at other sites in Ethiopia.
And this stand is extremely old, very, very heavy. This gomer fits on the top of this stand like this. You can see it's bent from time and wear and just sheer fatigue. But they claim when they became Christian that they did not need these implements any longer because they were involving the blood sacrifice. So with Jesus Christ offering the blood of sacrifice, these were no longer needed in their ceremonies. So they were left with the monks. Where did they get them? They had virtually no metal on the island and no ability to manufacture these items, and plus the items were extremely old in antiquity. So where did these implements come from? Where did they get them? They had virtually no metal on the island and no ability to manufacture these items, and plus the items were extremely old in antiquity. So where did these implements come from? These monks said that I was the first one to be shown these implements, because if these ever proved to be articles that were from Solomon's temple, these photographs will be the only ones in existence to date.
The monks claimed that they possessed more than just the Ark of the Covenant. With the Ark came other implements for worship from Solomon's temple. The monks agreed to show these items and remove them from the temple treasury. This crown was said to be worn by the chief musician, one of 3 musicians who traveled in procession with the Ark.
And then these monks entered the temple treasury and they brought out these hammered silver trumpets, very long trumpets and very ancient trumpets. And we see that in Scripture that it says in Numbers 10, verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, make 2 trumpets of hammered silver and use them for calling the community together and for having the camp set out.
These discoveries seem remarkable. But were these trumpets really relics from Old Testament times? Could they be identified as trumpets from Solomon's temple in ancient Israel? An important clue sits nearly 3,000 miles away in Rome, an arch dedicated to the Roman Emperor Titus. In this parade of victory, trumpets are seen, and they are clearly from ancient Israel.
When Titus sacked Jerusalem, he brought these trumpets back and paraded them through the streets of Rome. And a contemporary, an eyewitness that actually saw the trumpets, chiseled these trumpets on the archway in Rome at the Ark of Titus. And these trumpets seem to match perfectly with the trumpets that were brought from the treasury at St. Mary's of Zion. And these trumpets seem to match perfectly with the trumpets that were brought from the treasury at St. Mary's of Zion. And these trumpets seem to match perfectly with the trumpets that were brought from the treasury at St. Mary's of Zion. And these trumpets seem to match perfectly with the trumpets that were brought from the treasury at St. Mary's of Zion.
Every year I come here, they bring out a little bit more, and so maybe today we'll get to see another little bit of their treasury. This is called a gomer.
Gomer.
And it's made out of bronze. And it does fit with the description of an artifact from the Bible and even the temple. They claim it's from Solomon's temple. This gomer was placed on
Bob tells me they placed the gomer on a stand and used it to collect the blood from a slaughtered animal. But what's remarkable about this is that the Israelites stopped practicing animal sacrifice almost 2,000 years ago.
I mean, it's hard to know word. It's a tangible link.
Where would they have
the Temple of
gotten
Solomon,
this?
the Jewish people?
Of course, this is quite old. You can see.
But that's just the beginning. This is a treasure trove of religious relics, and each one seems to take us closer to the true story of the Ark.
Moses is holding the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments on this. They're pulling all kinds of stuff.
The monk is now bringing out a couple of pretty interesting objects. They call them meat forks. People were a lot smaller in ancient times, but this is very old, and I think it could possibly have some kind of connection with priestly garments and the sacrifices of the animals by the Levitical priests.
Well, the only, from what I know of ancient Judaism, the only person who wore the breastplate was the high priest. But he would have had a plate on the front of this that had the stones of the 12 tribes of Israel.
The high priest who wore this was considered the sole guardian of the Ark. Was he the man buried in the rocks on the island? Was he the one said to have brought the Ark here?
So if this is here, I mean, all the other stuff says a lot, but if this is here, then it almost requires that the high priest was here. That's compelling.
These items were used in Jewish ceremonies. So did Judaism survive here after the Levite priests were gone?
What did he say?
Did their religion take hold in Ethiopia?
It's Old Testament.
Really?
This whole area was Jewish.
In modern times, members of the Beta Israel were transported from their homeland to the state of Israel through Operation Moses from 1984 to 1985, Operation Joshua in 1985, and Operation Solomon in 1991. These operations were driven by the Zionist agenda aiming to repopulate modern Israel with groups claiming Israelite heritage. However, many Beta Israel members faced discrimination upon arrival in the state of Israel and were often treated as second-class citizens despite their significant cultural and spiritual heritage. Essentially, these true Israelites were unknowingly moved from their true Holy Land under government operations to a false Holy Land in order to present the false Holy Land as legitimate. Unfortunately, they had no idea, and to this day still probably have no idea what has been done to them. The term falasha, a derogatory term meaning wanderers, strangers, or exiles, was historically used to describe the Beta Israel, emphasizing their marginalized status in Ethiopian society. They are seen as outcasts both in their homeland and in the land they were taken to. As stated earlier, those who converted to the religion of Christianity were called falasha mora. Their conversion often came under coercion or social pressure, highlighting the challenges faced by this community in preserving their Israelite heritage. Are you noticing those curses of Deuteronomy 28 apply to this marginalized group? Well, let me show you another marginalized group in East Africa who also suffer from the same curses that show as a marker on the true people. And these people may also hold Israelite heritage. Let's talk about the Qemant people of northwestern Ethiopia. The Qemant people present a fascinating case for exploring ancient cultural, religious, and potential genealogical ties to the biblical Israelites. Their practices, traditions, and self-identification reveal elements that align with biblical accounts and ancient Hebraic customs, suggesting a possible historical connection. The Qemant's historical adherence to a pagan Hebraic religion, distinct from but related to the Beta Israel, highlights their unique position in Ethiopia's landscape. Key practices like animal sacrifices, sacred groves, Sabbath observance, dietary laws, and prayer traditions are reminiscent of ancient Israelite worship as described in the Torah. Their literal application of Leviticus 11 mirrors the dietary instructions given to Israel. This contrasts sharply with surrounding Ethiopian Orthodox practices, further underscoring their distinct identity. The Qemant's veneration of sacred groves, called Degega, and their use of kole trees for worship reflect a possible connection to ancient Israelite practices such as Abraham planting a grove in Genesis 21:33. Though groves later became associated with idolatry in Israel, their original use as places of divine encounter is noted. Their strict observance of Sabbath, including refraining from lighting fires, aligns closely with the command in Exodus 35:3. The Qemant also practice levirate marriage, explicitly outlined in Deuteronomy 25:5-10, reflecting an Israelite tradition that was rare outside Semitic cultures. The Qemant's monotheistic worship of Yidara or Mizgana, described as omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, aligns with the biblical description of Yah. Their invocation of Kedos, known as Holy Ones, may reflect a syncretized understanding of angels or patriarchal figures, akin to Israelite intercessory traditions. The Qemant tradition tracing their lineage to Noah and Ham's descendants is very intriguing, as they would not descend from Jacob, who is a descendant of Shem, making them a Hamitic people if true. The claim that their forefather, Yaner or Ayaner, was the grandson of Canaan links them genealogically to Ham, from whom Mizraim, the progenitor of the ancient Egyptians, and Kush, the progenitor of the Kushites, also descend. This perspective places the Qemant within the broader Hamitic framework, but yet their practices suggest significant Semitic or Shemite influence. This could result from centuries of intermingling between Hamitic and Shemitic peoples in East Africa, especially as we know that several Israelites were married to people of Hamitic nations, contrasting with the absence of Israelites being married to descendants of Japheth, the progenitor of the Eurasian nations in Scripture. The Qemant's relationship to the Beta Israel also adds another layer of complexity. While they are distinct groups, their shared Hebraic elements strongly suggest a common historical or cultural origin. The Qemant's diminishing numbers and near complete conversion to Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity reflect the pressures faced by small religious groups in preserving their traditions. Historically, minority groups with Hebraic practices have also been targets of suspicion and persecution, often labeled as sorcerers or outcasts, as the 19th century missionary Samuel Gobat noted regarding the Qemant. While the Qemant people's precise origins remain debated to this day, their religious observances echo the Torah's commands and reflect an enduring legacy of strong Hebraic influence in East Africa. Number 42. The Yibir or Igbo people. The Yibir of Somalia, also known as Igbo, are an intriguing people group whose identity and history present strong potential ties to the biblical Israelites. Their name, which is a Somali corruption of Hebrew, is an explicit acknowledgement of their claim to Israelite ancestry.
The Yibir is a single. It describes one person, but the plurality of the Yibir society is called Yibro.
In the Bible, the term Hebrew is associated with the descendants of Eber, who was an ancestor of Abraham, and thus of the Israelites. The Yibir's status as a marginalized people parallels the biblical curses outlined in Deuteronomy 28, particularly, "Thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations whither Yah shall lead thee." Their low caste status and societal discrimination are consistent with this biblical prophecy. Furthermore, the enduring hostility and ostracism faced by the Yibir resonate with the challenges Israelites endured during their captivities and dispersions. The Yibir engage in professions like blacksmithing, leatherwork, and folk medicine. Again, they are given terms such as outcasts and sorcerers. Additionally, their claimed ability to bless reflects the ancient Israelite role as a priestly nation. "And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation." Even in their degraded social state, the Yibir maintain a cultural memory of this spiritual legacy, as neighboring communities of Somalia still recognize their unique ability to bestow blessings. These roles echo the diverse trades practiced by Israelites during their captivities in foreign lands, where they were often relegated to skilled manual labor. The overwhelming Islamic adherence of the Yibir is not at all surprising given the historical pressures faced by minority groups in predominantly Muslim regions.
So Somalians don't like Jewish? So what is it about the Jewish people that you don't like?
They are born into Islam. Islam.
Forced conversions and social survival strategies have led many to outwardly adopt Islam while retaining a covert acknowledgement of their Hebrew roots. Many Yibir are ashamed of their Hebrew heritage and hide it among Somali society. This phenomenon aligns with historical accounts of Israelites being coerced into adopting foreign practices as seen in the Assyrian and Babylonian captivities spoken about earlier. Similarly, the Yibir's hidden identity mirrors the crypto-Jews of Spain and Portugal during the Inquisition, who outwardly professed Catholicism while secretly maintaining Israelite practices, which we will talk about in later proofs. If Moses led the Israelites into East Africa, it stands to reason that northern Ethiopia and neighboring regions, such as Somalia, became secondary settlement zones. The Yibir's oral traditions of Israelite origin suggest they could be among the groups who dispersed further eastward from the main Israelite population that settled in East Africa. Their self-identified Israelite heritage ties directly to the narrative of the Exodus and settlement in East Africa, and just like the Beta Israel and other Israelite groups in diaspora, the Yibir have faced systemic discrimination and alienation, aligning with the curses of Deuteronomy 28. Number 43. The Bantu. Still sticking with East Africa also, we're going to talk about a massive grouping of people in the continent of Africa, modernly known as the Bantu people. The Bantu refers to a group of people, languages, and cultures associated with a large linguistic family, mainly in areas of West, East, Central, and South Africa. Now, before we delve into the Bantu, I want to make it abundantly clear that I do not believe that all of the people in the Bantu group are descendants of ancient Israelites. This is not the case at all. However, I do strongly believe that many of the peoples within this categorization are, and it can be proven through linguistics, oral tradition, cultural practices, and much more evidence. We will select a few groups out of the Bantu people to prove this is the case. We will first start with the Swahili people of East Africa, an ethnic and cultural group native to the coastal regions of East Africa, particularly in modern-day Kenya, Tanzania, northern Mozambique, and the islands of the Indian Ocean, such as Zanzibar, Pemba, and the Comoros. The language that the Swahili people speak is known as Kiswahili, which is referred to as a Bantu language, but today we're going to entertain the hypothesis that Kiswahili could have its origins as a Semitic, Afro-Asiatic, or Semito-Hamitic language, such as Arabic, Hebrew, Tigrinya, and others. The argument for Kiswahili potentially having origins as an Afro-Asiatic language rests on linguistic, historical, and cultural intersections, particularly through the lens of Proto-Afro-Asiatic origins and cognates found between Hebrew and Kiswahili. Scholars theorize that Proto-Afro-Asiatic originated in the Horn of Africa, particularly in the region of Ethiopia, as this area contains a diversity of Afro-Asiatic languages, suggesting it may have been the locus of dispersion for this ancient language family. Kiswahili, while classified as a Bantu language, exhibits features and cognates that imply significant overlap with Semitic languages, necessitating a closer examination of its roots. Ethiopia, often considered a possible homeland for Proto-Afro-Asiatic, has long been recognized as a cradle of linguistic diversity. Linguists propose that the Proto-Afro-Asiatic language emerged in a single linguistic community in this region before dispersing. This dispersal produced branches like Semitic, Cushitic, and Omotic in the region and further afield, eventually influencing languages across North Africa and the Middle East. If Proto-Afro-Asiatic began in East Africa, then neighboring languages in the region, including early Bantu languages, could have retained or absorbed features of Afro-Asiatic origin before fully differentiating. Hebrew, a Semitic Afro-Asiatic language, and Kiswahili, classified as a Bantu language, share many lexical similarities, providing evidence for a historical connection that cannot simply be attributed to Arabic influence or loanwords. Let me give you some examples. These cognates suggest that Kiswahili may have preserved linguistic relics from a time when early Afro-Asiatic and Proto-Bantu languages were in contact, solidifying the case that the Bantu may have Semitic origins. Colonial-era scholars frequently mischaracterized Kiswahili as heavily Arabicized due to its historical connections with Arab traders and the Islamic cultural influence on the Swahili coast. However, this framing was not objective but ideologically motivated by emphasizing Arabic influence. European academics could downplay the indigenous African contributions to Kiswahili, effectively erasing its roots in the Bantu linguistic family and obscuring the possibility of earlier Semitic influences predating Arabic trade. Recognizing Kiswahili as both a Bantu language and one influenced by Semitic languages challenges the Eurocentric narrative that relegates Africa to a passive recipient of external linguistic and cultural influences. Admitting that Kiswahili's Semitic aspects might derive from an Afro-Asiatic connection would open the door to re-evaluating other Bantu languages for similar connections, highlighting a richer, more interconnected linguistic history for the region. And there are many other Bantu languages that share many lexical similarities with ancient Hebrew root words, which I will show you. If Kiswahili's origins are examined through the Afro-Asiatic framework, it would indicate an ancient and profound linguistic interaction between early Afro-Asiatic and Bantu speakers, likely in East Africa. Kiswahili's development as a Bantu language intertwined with Semitic linguistic elements aligns with the theory that Proto-Afro-Asiatic originated in East Africa, particularly Ethiopia. The Hebrew Kiswahili cognates and the region's historical interconnectedness support the idea that Kiswahili's Semitic features predate Arabic influence. And we will prove this further by moving on to the language of the Botswana Bantus, the Setswana language. Botswana are the native people of South and Eastern Botswana and the Gauteng, Northwest, Northern Cape, Free State, and other provinces of South Africa, where the majority of Botswana are located. Their language, Setswana or Setswana, belongs to the Sotho-Tswana language family. But again, there is a possibility that Setswana could have its origins as in Semitic, Afro-Asiatic, or Semito-Semitic language. Let's take a look at some of the ancient Hebrew roots and compare them to Setswana. It's abundantly clear that there is a connection between the Afro-Asiatic languages and the Bantu languages. And the European scholars want you to attribute this to outside influence coming into Africa rather than the Proto-Afro-Asiatic potentially originating within the continent of Africa. This only solidifies the conclusion that the ancient Israelites were within the continent of Africa. As a matter of fact, here's some more Bantu words in general that seem to have the same roots in the ancient Hebrew. And we will now take a look at the customs and traditions of the Bantu people and the extreme similarities between them and the Israelites of the Bible. Now let's talk about the Basotho Bantus. To quote directly from Magda LaRue, a professor in biblical and ancient studies from the University of South Africa, from her book, The Lemba, A Lost Tribe of Israel in Southern Africa, LaRue writes, only a few reports mentioned in passing apparent similarities between certain Sotho-Tswana customs and Mosaic or Levitical laws of the Old Testament. Many European observers, however, speculated that the system of sacred animals and the practice of burying the dead with their faces turned towards the northeast originated from ancient Egypt and possibly Abyssinia. Therefore, most reports rather identified the Sotho-Tswana as ancient Egyptians. Another case of European scholars completely writing off the connection of the Sotho-Tswana with the Israelites and instead attributing it to them being descendants of the ancient Egyptians. Very interesting. Let's refer to another source by Jan Knappert, a well-known Dutch linguist expert on the Swahili language, and his book Myths and Legends of Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland, where he says, for readers who are unfamiliar with Africa, it might be interesting to realize the many points of resemblance between the customs of the Basotho and Botswana on the one hand and those of the Jews in the Old Testament on the other. Casales, a Hebrew scholar as well as a Bantuist, quotes several passages from the Bible in which the Jewish customs appear identical with those of the southern Bantu. The Basotho are mainly a strongly monotheistic people, just like the Israelites, both cultures worshipping a supreme being who is seen as the creator and sustainer of life. Both view God as personal and active in their lives. Both the Israelites and the Basotho use sacrifices to mark significant events such as birth, death, and marriage. Regular rest is also a feature of both cultures, with communal worship involving song, dance, and prayers. Both the Israelites and the Basotho practice circumcision, and in the Basotho culture, it marks the transition from boyhood to manhood, involving training, teachings, and rituals. It also signifies belonging to the community and a covenant with God. The Basotho have a dowry payment system, exactly like the Israelites, and they call it bohali. It is a gift given by the groom or his family to the bride's family as a sign of commitment to the marriage and to the bride herself. The gift is usually in the form of cash or livestock. Both cultures also have specific practices for food preparation, crop growing, and seasonal celebrations. Both the Israelites and the Basotho have cleansing rituals. Before major ceremonies, e.g. childbirth, menstruation, symbolic washing is performed. These rituals are used to mark transitions and purify the body and spirit. There is also oral traditions, both the Israelites and Basotho using storytelling to pass down history, morals, and cultural teachings. These are only a few of the striking similarities between both the Israelite and Basotho culture. I could go on all day. I have noticed the similarities. The Basotho have noticed the similarities, and even the European scholars have noticed the similarities. It is undeniable through linguistics, culture, and there are still other Bantu groups we need to talk about. Let's move on to the Xhosa of South Africa. They are the second largest ethnic group in South Africa, primarily concentrated in the Eastern Cape Province, with significant populations in other parts of the country. The Xhosa speak isiXhosa, a Bantu language that is one of South Africa's 11 official languages. As shown earlier, there are many lingual cognates that suggest isiXhosa may have its roots in the Proto-Afro-Asiatic dispersing out of Ethiopia. In 1833, Stephen Kay of the South African Institute also noticed the linguistic similarities between Hebrew and isiXhosa, as well as noticing how so many of their traditional customs are strikingly similar to those of the ancient Hebrews. In his book, Travels and Researches in Kaffraria, Kay says, as a late author has justly remarked, many of their traditionary customs, besides the rite of circumcision, bear a striking resemblance to those of the Mosaic Law and seem strongly to corroborate Mr. Barrow's opinion that they derive, however remotely, their lineage from an Arabian origin. Before we continue, remember earlier how I told you that European scholars love to blame the Semitic influence in African culture on outside sources like the Arabs? Yeah, exactly what these guys are doing. Continuing on, some terms in their language also appear to point to a similar source. For example, the name of that beautiful animal, the springbok, is tsebe in the Amakosa tongue, and it is a curious fact that the very same word is used in Hebrew to denote an antelope of the same description, if not the precise species, erroneously rendered roe by our translators, like a roe, tsebe, or a young hart upon the mountains of Bether. It cannot but be observed that many circumstances connected with their funeral rites bear a remarkable affinity to certain observances which were enjoined upon the ancient Israelites, unto whom it was said, He that toucheth the dead body of any man shall be unclean 7 days. Numbers 19:11. And this, as far as I have been able to learn, is the precise view that the tribes in question take of the matter. Let's get an even older source. In the 1526 book, The History and Description of Africa by Leo Africanus, Leo says, some also think that the people called Caffre or Kafates at this day, who are Gentiles, draw their original from the Jews, but being environed on every side by idolaters, they have by little and little swerved from the law of Moses, and so are become, as it were, insensibly idolaters. Just for context, the term Caffre or Kafir is an ethnic slur and an exonym, meaning a term given to a group by others, and it was predominantly used to refer to Bantus of South Africa, such as the Xhosa, so much so that South Africa was referred to as Kaffraria. So we have people all the way in the 1500s who suspect that the South African Bantus are descendants of the Israelites of the Bible. We have linguistic cognates that coincide with the ancient Hebrew root words, and we have historical instances of them practicing the Mosaic Law. But surely that's it. Oh no, it isn't. Let's refer to Anthologia Anthropologica by Sir James George Fraser, a renowned 20th century social anthropologist. He notices this about the South African Bantus. All the animals pronounced unclean in the Mosaic Law are unclean to the Kafirs. They turn with absolute disgust and loathing from swine's flesh under every form and will not even touch a pig, the hare, the bat, the owl, all kinds of fish, and several other animals and birds they never think of touching. Although the Hottentots, Bushmen, and other tribes dwelling in the midst of and around them eat all these indiscriminately. This is what he has to say about the birth and death customs they kept. The woman at and for several days after childbirth is unclean and is separated in a hut by herself. Those touching a dead body are also unclean and are separated and made to shave their heads and beards, just exactly as the Israelites did. But the Israelites weren't black and they had nothing to do with Africa, just like Rome wants you to think. Even the Zulu were identified as descendants of Israelites by scholars and researchers. G.R. Peppercorn, the magistrate of Bafana location, observed to the Native Affairs Commission that a general type of the customs and laws of the Amazulu may be found in the early history of the Hebrews. Zulu polygamy, marriage customs, even attitudes toward work were all described in the appropriate biblical passage. He suggested that any European who wanted to understand Zulu customs had only to read the Old Testament. I think it's safe to say that there is certainly an Israelite heritage among the Bantus of Africa, and to put the cherry on top, both the Zulu and Xhosa are part of a cultural group called the Nguni people, which is intriguing considering one of the sons of Naphtali, the head of one of the 12 tribes, is called Guni. Number 44, Dan Yacouba. So we've found a lot of Israelite presence in East Africa, the place where the Israelites actually went after the Exodus from Egypt. We've also found it in South Africa through many of the Bantu groups. But what about the people of West Africa? Is there any sign of possible Israelite heritage in the west coast of the African continent? You bet there is. Let's talk about the Dan Yacouba of northwestern Ivory Coast and Liberia. Like the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, spoken about earlier, the Dan Yacouba, also known as the Dan, claim to be descendants of Dan, one of the 10 lost tribes of Israel.
La tribu de Dan, au départ, vient d'Éthiopie. C'est-à-dire que d'après les recherches qu'on fait, pour certains, ils viennent d'Éthiopie et sont montés vers la Côte d'Ivoire jusqu'au Mans.
They are also referred to as Yacouba, and the explanation they give is that Yacouba would mean children of Jacob, reinforcing the idea of descent from Jacob known as Israel, making them Israelites. Hear it from themselves.
D'après vous, qu'est-ce que ça signifie,
Yacouba, chez nous, ça, normalement, ba là, c'est la contraction de Banu, c'est-à-dire enfant. C'est les enfants de Yacou.
Yacouba, les enfants de Yacou.
Les enfants de Yacou. Yacouba, nous.
Yacouba. C'est qui Yacou?
Bon,
Jacob.
On ne sait pas.
Jacob.
C'est l'un de nos ancêtres. C'est l'ancêtre de Yacouba, des dents.
The Dan observe a day of rest on Saturday, which they call Saba. On this day, they are required to do no work, no buying or selling, and are required to rest and gather as a community with work prohibitions similar to those observed in biblical tradition. They even have an oral tradition they have created speaking of the bad spirits that linger in bushes on the Sabbath day in order to scare the Danites and deter them from doing any work on the ordained rest day.
Et qu'ils venaient, à qui ils apportent l'offrande chaque 7e jour, qui est le jour de sacrifice qu'on appelle Saba.
Samedi, il ne fait rien, samedi. C'est un jour de repos total. Et ça ne date pas d'aujourd'hui.
Le jour de la semaine qui est en repos, est-ce qu'il y a une coutume particulière dans les familles? Comment les jours se font, le jour de repos, comment ils se matérialisent?
Le jour de repos se matérialise par le fait que les hommes et les femmes s'abstiennent des activités champêtres, culturelles.
Ce jour-là, le temps ne fait rien, ne travaille pas. Ce qu'ils doivent manger même normalement le samedi, là, tout est fait le vendredi soir. À la rigueur, ce qu'on peut faire le samedi, c'est faire la cuisine. Les affaires, les bonnes affaires, les affaires très intéressantes ne se traitent pas samedi, parce que samedi, c'est un jour de repos. Et pour obliger les gens à ne pas aller au champ les samedis, le temps dit que ce samedi-là, CI, qui est CI, samedi là, c'est le jour où les mauvais esprits sortent dans les brousses.
Donc,
et si tu vas en brousse, ces mauvais esprits risquent de t'emporter.
Quand on est quelque part, tout le monde vient au village devant les souverains sacrificateurs pour fêter ce jour-là. La personne ne travaille.
Le samedi,
personne ne travaillait. On a les noms de jours. Par exemple, samedi, c'est Saba, Saï, Saba, Saba, Ado Saba. Je vais pour le sacrifice, c'est le jour du sacrifice. Puisqu'on sait qu'en Israël, le samedi, on dit maintenant samedi, le 7e jour, ça, on dit Saba, ou Shabbat, ou Saba, ou Saï, ça veut dire jour du sacrifice.
The practice of circumcision among the Dan is highlighted as an important common point shared with the Israelites, as both the Dan Yacouba and the Israelites practice this tradition.
Les Danites ont gardé la circoncision, ce qui donne lieu à de grandes réjouissances.
Et puis, les circoncisions aussi. Pour que, vous savez, Dieu aime le peuple. C'est le plus grand démocrate. Donc les gens se rassemblent pour dire, ah, cette année, nos enfants de cette génération vont aller en circoncision. Les parents s'y apprêtent. Les repas, les bêtes à immoler, tout ce qu'il faut. Ils l'apprêtent.
Les autres peuples en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est maintenant avec le problème sanitaire, la santé, que les gens puissent circoncire leurs enfants. Mais c'est le peuple Dan qui avait la circoncision comme marque. Marque, tel que Dieu a dit à Abraham.
Pourtant, celui qui n'a pas été circoncis.
Celui qui n'est pas circoncis, ce n'est pas un homme. Ce n'est même pas la peine de le fréquenter.
Causer même à lui. Il peut pas
prendre droit à certains secrets.
Another irrefutable proof is the language of the Dan in Ivory Coast. Over 90% of their words are Hebrew words. Even the Ashkenazi cannot deny this. Here are some examples.
Même les historiens comme Noël Loukou, qui sont les grands historiens ivoiriens, ils ont dit les Danites, hein, leur langue, on dit Dan au premier, ça veut dire ceux qui parlent la langue de Dan. Mais la langue de Dan, c'est l'hébreu. C'est l'hébreu. 90% des mots danites en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est l'hébreu.
Alors, pour moi, la ressemblance, d'abord, c'est le fait de ces termes en hébreu. Ça, c'est les termes en hébreu qui me paraissaient tout à fait marquants, parce que dans un patois, on n'a pas l'habitude de mettre des termes hébreux, c'est-à-dire que c'est vraiment dans le langage usité.
J'ai commencé à comparer les mots. Voilà. Et en hébreu, on dit Bereshit, mais chez nous, on dit Brasi. Vous voyez, c'est presque les mêmes racines, les mêmes façons. Yahweh, on dit Yahweh. Donc, chez nous, Yahweh, c'est Yahweh. Hein? Adonai, Adodang. Alors, tout ça, j'ai commencé à étudier tout un panorama linguistique et avec l'hébreu ancien par rapport à notre langue. Je dis bien l'hébreu ancien parce que ça évolue. Alors, il y a plusieurs similitudes linguistiques comme ça, et il y a plusieurs similitudes culturelles. Et par exemple, les habits que nous portons avec cette bande, qui étaient les habits des Cohen. Et dans ma langue danite en Côte d'Ivoire, les Cohen, on les appelle les Cohen. C'est la même chose.
Les noms dents là, c'est les dents de l'ouest de la Côte d'Ivoire qui ont conservé ce nom-là. Sinon, les dents, il y en a un peu partout. Moi, j'ai parcouru un peu quelques pays où il y a les dents.
Mais c'est nous qui avons conservé.
C'est les dents de Mans, la région des montagnes, qui a conservé le nom dents.
On nous appelle dents, mais notre nom aussi c'est Yacouba.
C'est Yacouba.
Yacouba. On a deux noms.
Yacouba et dents.
The Dan Yacouba also have Israelite purity laws, just like the Zulu, Xhosa, Beta Israel, and many others, speaking about how when a woman has given birth or is on her period, she is unclean and needs to be separated for a period of time until she is clean again, just like the Israelites practiced.
Comment vivent les femmes ici par rapport aux hommes? Est-ce qu'il y a une séparation?
Il y a une habitude que nos ancêtres ont instaurée qui est en train de s'estomper petit à petit. Les femmes procréent, ce sont nos mamans. Mais il y a les périodes de menstruation où la femme est en règle. Elle devient impure.
Par exemple, la femme est dans ses temps d'impureté, on doit par exemple pas s'approcher du tout.
Pendant combien de temps, vous savez?
Non, là, il n'a pas
le temps que,
sincèrement,
que les propres.
3-4 jours par mois. 3-4 jours par mois.
Quand une femme est dans sa période-là, elle n'approche même pas son mari. Elle ne salue même pas son mari. Quand la femme est dans sa période de menstrues, il y a des personnes qui ne mangent pas sa nourriture. Parce qu'on dit qu'elle est impure, la nourriture qu'elle touche devient impure.
Mais les autres peuples de Côte d'Ivoire, c'est pareil ou maintenant
Non.
Nous sommes un peu particuliers.
Le temps, il est un peu particulier.
Ce qui fait que on ne devait pas se marier à autre ethnie. Par exemple, les guéris qui étaient à côté, si tu te maries à une femme guérie, ça y est, le peuple ne te considère pas. On te considère comme quelqu'un qui s'est profané. Ça, c'est comme ça. Moi, j'ai un peu grandi, mon papa m'expliquait ces choses pareilles, comme ça. Que si jamais Guéré ou Obé et toutes les autres ethnies qui nous entourent là, tu prends une femme parmi eux, tu es perdu. C'est ce qui, moi, c'est resté à mon esprit.
And guess what? They also practice levirate marriage, just like the Israelites.
Là aussi, sont restées des influences des lois du hiboum, le lévira, les lois de la veuve restée sans enfant.
Une femme qui reste veuve. Comment la famille du mari qui a son fils qui est décédé se comporte par rapport à la veuve, aux enfants, ou bien à la veuve qui n'a pas eu d'enfant? Est-ce qu'il y a des choses dans ce sens-là? Est-ce que la famille l'aide à se remarier?
Absolument.
Avec qui?
Avec un cousinage de la famille. Par exemple, la femme qui a des enfants et le mari est mort, on dit, ces enfants-là, c'est pas facile d'éduquer les enfants d'autrui. Trouve dans notre environnement ici un parent, un frère, pour que tu te maries afin qu'on surveille les enfants ensemble, au risque que les enfants ne se dispersent pour aller à la délinquance infantile. Et il fait, on a.
The Danites also have agricultural rituals, including offering the first harvest as a form of gratitude to God, resembling the Feast of Weeks traditions.
Les Danites ont également une coutume qui rappelle la fête de Shavuot, telle qu'elle était pratiquée à l'époque du temple de Jérusalem.
Oui, nous avons le premier, l'année. Quand l'année finit, on offre les prémices au Gadol, c'est-à-dire chez nous on dit God, Gadol. On lui offre les prémices, parce que pour nous c'est à Dieu qu'on donne.
Et c'est pour cela, le don, quand il a fait sa plantation, il a planté du riz et tout ce qu'il plante, quel que soit ce qu'il plante. La première récolte qu'il fait, c'est pas lui qui mange. Il va donner au gardien de la case sacrée. Que ce soit du riz, que ce soit du manioc, que ce soit du maïs.
Il faut créer une autre cérémonie qui s'ajoute à d'autres cérémonies, les danses et autres, à des périodes de récolte, Pentecôte et récolte. On présente les prémices à Dieu, c'est Pentecôte, et puis il y a d'autres cérémonies.
Dans la Bible, il y a ce qu'on appelle le glanage. Quand on fait des chants,
oui,
on laisse une partie. Normalement, chez nous, quand mon papa faisait des chants, quand vous avez fini de récolter, vous permettez à des vieilles femmes, à des tantes de venir récolter. Vous dites que bon, allez-y récolter.
C'est la partie là, vous ne touchez pas.
Allez-y récolter ce que vous trouvez là.
C'est pour le social, quoi.
C'est pour l'indigent.
And they worship one God as a monotheistic people. Speaking of God, what name do the Dan Yacouba use to refer to God?
C'est le seul peuple qui s'adresse à l'éternel Dieu. Et on dit Atana, éternel, Atana. Et on dit Yahweh. Ou on dit Yahweh. Ou bien Yehova, Jéhovah, Yehova. Il est grand, le grand Dieu.
Atana.
Le Dieu suprême, c'est Atana.
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 Atana. Ce qui peut correspondre peut-être à Adonai ou bien à Ata. Atana.
Yeah, It's undeniable that the Dan Yacouba are descendants of the ancient Israelites of the Bible from the tribe of Dan, and even the European Ashkenazim, who claim to be the true descendants of the Israelites, admit it too. Number 45. Temne or Temeni people. Continuing on with the west coast of Africa, let's move on to the inhabitants of Sierra Leone, specifically the Temne or Temeni people. The Temne constitute the largest ethnic group in Sierra Leone, at 35.5% of the total population. One of the striking pieces of evidence that suggests that the Temne could be descendants of the Israelites is the name Temne or Temeni itself. According to the scriptures, Temeni is mentioned in 1 Chronicles 4:6, and Nara bare him Ahuzam, and Hefer, and Temeni, and Ha-Hashtari. These were the sons of Nara. This verse identifies Temeni as one of the sons of Asher by his wife Nara. This Asher is a descendant of Judah, therefore Temeni was of the tribe of Judah. This could suggest that the Temeni of Sierra Leone could be descendants of Judah, through their possible forefather Temeni. Another piece of evidence is the fact that the Temeni people are a patrilineal society, meaning that lineage, tribal, and ethnic identity is decided by the father. This is common throughout West African societies, including the Igbo and the Yoruba of Nigeria, which we will speak on later. Like all the other examples, both the Israelites and the Temeni practice male circumcision. As a result of the 7th century Islamic conquests of North and West Africa and invasions from neighboring Fulani in the early 15th century, around 90% of the Temeni practice the Islamic faith. However, there are still Israelite traditions that have lingered in their culture. An example includes leadership by elders or prophets. The Temne have traditionally relied on elders and spiritual leaders to guide their communities. These leaders often perform roles similar to biblical prophets, acting as custodians of culture and mediators of disputes. The Temne clans have been numerous, each independent, divided as a chiefdom. The Temeni political structure is decentralized, as each village is overseen by a leader, usually an elder, who in turn reports to a higher-level leader of several villages. These leaders are usually selected based on their ancestry, similar to the Israelites. Like the Israelites, the Temeni are traditionally farmers of staples such as rice and cassava. They are also fishermen and traders. The cash crops include cotton, peanuts, palm, and kola nuts. According to some oral traditions, the history of the Temeni migration toward present-day Sierra Leone begins in ancient Israel. From Israel, the Temeni migrated to Ethiopia. From Ethiopia to the Mali Empire. I would argue that the Temeni were never in the nation-state known as Israel today, but migrated from Ethiopia, just like the oral tradition claims. Do you notice how so many tribes have a tradition of coming from Ethiopia? Because that is indeed the true land that the Israelites settled after coming out of Egypt, not the Levant. Number 46. The Igbo. Moving on to Nigeria, let's talk about a notorious group of West Africa known as the Igbo people. They are a large West African ethnic group primarily found in the Abia, Anambra, Ebonyi, Enugu, and Imo states of Nigeria. But much of the African diaspora, due to the transatlantic slave trade, are of Igbo descent, including many Afro-Americans today, due to the specific targeting of the west coast of Africa, where the Igbo are primarily found. It is said that there has been much speculation about the origins of the Igbo people, but today I will show you irrefutable proof that the Igbo are indeed descendants of the ancient Israelites. Let me premise this by showing you that the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, who claim to be the descendants of the Israelites in the modern state of Israel, already accept that the Igbo are indeed descendants of the Israelites, so you can go argue with them if you want.
How many people, I'm curious, in this room, growing up, not revelation from God, but growing up, knew that they are connection descendants to the children of Israel? I'm curious. How many? How many really truly knew that? It's pretty much 99% of you.
The entire Igbo race know that we are Jews. We are no longer speculating.
So,
time will be given.
Throw at me, this is so fascinating.
All right.
Throw at me a couple of other Jewish traditions. Some things that I would like to chew my teeth on.
All right, thank you so much. You see, I have here over 100 reasons to prove that Igbos are Israelites from the scriptures, from the Torah. And one of them is circumcision. We have already talked about it, circumcising on the 8th day. And another one that follows is the morning of the day.
Morning.
When
a person, so let me ask you a question. This is very important.
Yes.
When a person dies,
yes,
what do you do in the Igbo tradition?
In the Igbo tradition,
in Judaism, you have what's called the Shiva and the 30.
Yes.
Do you have anything?
We do such thing. It is very clear in our tradition. before the coming of the white man, the moment an Igbo person dies, he is buried between 24 hours to 48 hours. We were
really?
not,
That's a Jewish law?
Yes.
That's a clear Jewish law.
And even our old men will even give his instruction, even in this present time.
Wow.
They should not be taken to mortuary.
Tell me, when you bury a person, I have a question, you might know the answer.
Yeah.
When you bury a Igbo person, do you put him in a casket or do you wrap him in something? Interesting.
Before this present time, we don't put people in caskets. We wrap them.
That's why I'm asking.
The white man that brought caskets and issue here.
That's amazing. You see, because in
we
Judaism,
we bury people with what we call opa. It is opa that we use in those days. It's a kind of what we call it, a basket.
Okay.
Where we wrap the person
but it was not a casket.
No, it was not a casket.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yes.
Fascinating. Give us a couple of more.
All right.
So do you put 24, 48 hours?
Yes.
That's the tradition. That's Judaism. That's one of the big Jewish laws.
All right. So the moment somebody dies, between 48 hours is buried. And you have to give up to 48 hours in case their descendants or its close relations who are far away, they can be given information to come and see the man the last time and pay him the last respect.
Wow.
Now, so when we bury, the moment we bury, we begin to count. And then the counting, there are the first preliminary ceremony that we do that could last for 7 days. The first preliminary.
7 days?
Yes. Then after the 7 days, we have the one we call it Izu Asa.
That's
called
in Hebrew Shiva?
Yes. The one we have the full 1 month. Because we work with a lunar calendar.
Yeah,
that is when we consummate it, and the woman now have to mourn the husband for the next exactly 12 months.
That's a very clear
very
clear Jewish tradition. Right. Very clear. Anything else you have for
us? All right. Now in Igbo, concerning the dead, we do not bury our own people outside Igbo land, no matter wherever they die.
Wait. Tell me that this is important. Yeah. Explain this again.
What we are saying is
that some years back I was in Kaduna. Kaduna is in northern Nigeria.
Okay.
So we lost a little baby and took her to the general cemetery.
Wait, I want to ask. This is a very important. Is the Igbo people have their own cemeteries, or they mixed in with other people when they bury?
We don't have a place. Listen to me. In Igbo land, we don't have a place we call cemetery, where people like other people do. But what we have is that if anybody dies, he has a compound. Like this person has a very large compound. If it's a man, he must be buried in front of his compound. If it's a woman, at the backyard, depending on the age. So we don't have cemetery, a particular place we call cemetery, where we bury everybody. No. It must be buried.
An Igbo man who dies in Lagos is brought
back to
Igbo
his
land
own
for
place.
burial.
Oh, wow.
If he dies in America, they bring him down here and bury him.
You're kidding me.
We don't bury him in Igbo man
outside. And wherever a man is buried, it becomes what we call it. It's an authentic property of that man and his descendants. That is to say, like the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham had to born. The moment he bought it, it became an authentic property for himself and for his children. That is how we know who owns where he owns. If your father is buried in this place, nobody can come here and say this place belongs to him.
Wow. So let me ask you about another thing that so many things going through my mind right now. This is so interesting. Is it interesting to you? It's amazing. It's your ancestry. I think it should be interesting to every Jew in the world.
Now, President, I was part of the people who took part in that test.
Okay.
I didn't even have all the details. But for all we know, that every Igbo man here knows that we are part of the lost 10 tribe of Israel. DNA test or no DNA test, we know that we are part of the lost 10 tribe of Israel. And besides, those of you out there in Israel, I know that as far back as 1919, there was nothing like Israel. You were scattered all over the world. I know how the scientist of Manchester University, Dr. Let me recall his name now, who invented an atom during the First World War. Right. Then, and Theodor Herzl, a journalist who now started moving for the Zionist organization. So you were all over the world. Nobody was there. The place was a desolate place. But we are here. We know that we are Igbos.
You know, in a way, you're doing things in the ancient customs of our people.
Because
But-
we're Asian people.
Yeah.
We're Asian people.
Yes, yes.
That's a fact to show you that we're more ancient than even the what do you call it, the 1948 establishment of the state of Israel.
Yeah, I understand that. That's
Yes.
And besides, an Igbo man who kills somebody by accident.
Yes.
Kiss, yes?
If a man in Ihiala kills by accident, he runs from this particular community to another town. And we never come back to this town until after 7 years because we have no standing high priest. Onye na-akpọ ya Igbo ọsọ ọchụ. Onye Igbo gburu ọchụ na-agba ọsọ ọchụ. Just like he said, the city of refuge in Israel.
Yes.
Yeah, I understood.
So we do that.
I have told you that a
Amazing.
Igbo man who hanged himself, who died by hanging,
by
is
hanging.
never buried. Like in my own area where I came from, in Ngwaland, also in Abia State.
Yes.
We don't bury them. We go to invite people from Avo. They go to the bush where he hanged himself, dug a pit under that bush, under that tree,
And bury him there.
somebody will climb and cut the rope. He will fall into the pit,
and he's
they
buried.
will close the pit and return
You know
back
what?
home.
You know what you are?
Who are
You're an ancient Israelite.
Ancient Israel, that's who we are. That's who we are. So if you give me time, if you give me time,
But-
all that he said,
I know. We don't have.
there are so many years.
I know. Look at this. This is pages and pages of
Yes.
notes. And I promise we'll give more teaching. But here is my challenge to you.
All right.
I'm hearing some of your traditions. It's like the days of the Bible.
Yes.
Do you want to remain ancient Israelites or you want to be Jews? That is the question I have for you.
Thank you. I will answer that question.
Go ahead, I will help you.
After the demise of Solomon, we now have the northern and southern kingdom of Israel.
Yes.
So when we talk about Jews, Jews are Israelites, but all Israelites are not Jews. The 10 tribes that got lost are not Jews. They were Israelites.
Well, it's depending.
So minority cannot swallow the majority. We are here. We are the majority down here. So you are minority, and we are older than you.
All right, Maradi. That's wonderful. That's wonderful relation, brother.
The only problem that I have with the Ashkenazim and Sephardim admitting that the Igbo are descendants of ancient Israel is that they claim that the Igbo are only from the so-called lost 10 tribes, just the northern kingdom, while it is true that many of the Igbo are descendants of tribes such as Gad, as we will prove later. The Igbo also contain remnants of the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, who are the southern kingdom tribes. The reason they do this is because the Ashkenazim of today claim descent from Judah, hence the word Jew coming from the Hebrew Yehudi. Accepting the evidence that the Igbo descend from Judah would create a big problem for them, and they can't have that. Therefore, they label the Igbo as only Northern Kingdom Israelites because the evidence they have is irrefutable, so they must concede. The Igbo tradition claims descent from Eri, who is believed to be a son of Gad, one of the 12 sons of Jacob. This aligns with the biblical narrative, where Gad's sons are listed, including Eri.
All right, family. So we know that there's been this huge debate about those people who are there in the place they're calling Israel, who are stating their Jewish lineage comes through their mother's side.
Yes.
And we know the Bible speaks of lineage coming through the man's side.
Yeah.
And you all follow the paternal, the male side of things.
Yeah.
Why is it that y'all choose the paternal side, and what does that signify?
Let me start with this.
Sure.
We are the children of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac has a mother, but we don't mention his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac begat Jacob and Esau. Jacob begat Gad.
Mm-hmm.
So when we count from the father, you are your father's son.
Mm-hmm.
In my father's house, we are 12. 12 male and 1 female.
Okay.
The female has gone out.
Mm-hmm.
she has been given out for marriage, who don't come from mother, because you are the male. And because you are the male, you represent your father. Okay, when you come from the female, whom you have given out to marry outside. Supposing my younger sister is married to an Igbo person or an American. So I am from America. No, we come from the father, because you represent your father and you have to live where your father was. That's why we claim to be Israel, whom we are, because we know our grandfather is Jacob, and that Jacob is the man called Israel.
You know, you mentioned Gad, the tribe of Gad.
Yeah. Yes.
And he is the fifth son.
Seventh son.
The seventh son.
Yes.
Of Jacob.
Yes.
But he is Gad is the son of Eri.
Eri is the son of God.
Excuse me, Eri is the son of God.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We've been talking about all these tribes and stuff.
Yes.
So, how do people want to refute that? How do you all know that you all come from the seed of Gad or Eri?
Okay. A lot of things prove that. Even if you go, let me start from what you know before. When you go to the Bible book, from Genesis to Malachi, it's our own history.
Okay.
The history there showed us that we are the tribe of God.
So you saying
yes
that the Europeans changed the names?
Yes, now.
The locations?
Yes.
Of what is the truth here?
Yes, now.
The Igbo are a patrilineal society claiming lineage and descent from the father's side, like the Israelites.
I don't want to get too far off of the paternal.
No, go on, man. We are there.
You may mention, because, you know, some are saying that the reason why they do the maternal is that what we say, mama's babies, daddy's maybe. Meaning, mama knows who will always know who the father is.
Yeah.
The daddy can only guess that baby inside that woman is his if she's not a righteous woman. Okay. I can understand why the Europeans would think that, because the women may be different here than there. And if she's married to you, your wife would not go out and sleep with somebody else.
Yes, yes.
A man would know his wife and who the baby inside his wife is.
Yes.
He would know his child.
Yes.
Is there anything beyond just knowing to know if it's your child?
Excuse me, may I come in?
Sure.
Thank you very much. You know, we are not talking about technology here.
Right.
We are talking about the spirit being, which we call Chuku.
The spirit being?
Yeah.
Yes.
Whom we call Chuku,
okay.
Who is God, the supreme God, the God Almighty.
Okay.
That is what we are discussing here now.
Yes.
When Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob came into this matter, it's no longer a technology affair.
Yes.
It's no longer a technology matter. So now,
It's reality.
when Mary got pregnant, according to the Bible, that Mary got pregnant
according
through
to the
the
Bible.
Holy Spirit.
Yes.
That's what the Bible said.
Yeah.
Now, Joseph doubted
Yes.
the pregnancy.
Yes.
Because he had never had any intercourse with the woman before the pregnancy.
Yes.
But what happened? The spring being revealed to Joseph that the baby inside the womb is not what we call bastard here.
Yes.
It's not a fatherless baby.
Yes.
That this baby is the God's child.
Okay.
That God planted the baby inside the womb. According to the Bible history, that's what we're saying.
Yes.
So everything you see, we follow, and everything you see, we view it according to the revelation of the Almighty God.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are talking about the tradition now.
Yes.
Abraham told his son Isaac, right, that getting married must be from their own tribe.
Village, yes.
You know why something like that happened? the Almighty God revealed that to Abraham. So
you must marry within your own tribe.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and when Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac to God, it was not through internet. It was not technology. The same Almighty God revealed that Abraham, go and sacrifice this only child for me. So everything you see we are doing here is from Almighty God. I will prove that to you. And if you doubt that, you will see it yourself. So what I'm saying,
I'm getting what you said. I'm actually saying even why it's important to marry within your own tribe.
All right.
Even if she decided to go out and sleep with somebody in another tribe, he's still an Israelite.
What I'm trying to say, God did not tell the woman to marry within your own tribe.
Yeah.
God told the man that the marriage must be within the circle.
It must be in the circle.
Yeah.
Okay. The man.
The man.
Okay.
So that's why you know that everything is all about the man. It's a man's world.
Yes.
If you don't know, it's a man's world.
And even when let me come in now, when Adam sinned against God, God didn't call Eve. He called Adam. Where are you?
Yes.
Adam is of his.
God has been with Eve.
Yes.
But he didn't
ask Eve.
He knew that the responsibility was not on Eve.
But
it was on
where
Adam.
are you? He said, I am hiding. Where are you hiding? We're not friends any longer.
So these things we are saying now is the main reason we follow paternal side instead of maternal.
Supremacy.
So the God approved the paternal
lineage.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So when you see when you see all these things in the Bible, it's because we didn't we never had a wider journalism.
Yes.
So to showcase our own culture. If we didn't tell you that this belongs to us, not
we didn't have. I'm with you. Many have come into around the world.
Yes.
The Europeans, whether you want to call them Americans, because they came from Europe, have gone around the globe and stolen identities.
Yes. Yeah.
Stolen knowledge.
Yes.
Stolen ways of life and systems and all these things and renamed it and claimed it. And this is what you're saying is that you're clarifying because the Bible has been taught to us in a different light. When you all say, the Bible says this right here, look, we've been doing this for thousands of years, and it's not, it doesn't mean this is what it means by what we do.
Yes. So there's something I want to tell you.
Yes.
I went to Essen, Germany.
Yes.
I went to Essen, Germany, and I went to the Jewish Museum.
Yeah.
The Jewish Museum is located at Essen, Germany.
Okay.
So when I visited the place, I told the people there that all these things here are from my place.
Came from Africa, yes.
Yeah, not from Africa, from my village,
from your village.
Yes.
Oh.
So I told them, where do you have the next synagogue? Here. They gave me the address of the next synagogue. I went with my brother. They refused us entry into the synagogue. Those in the synagogue refused us entry into the synagogue.
Did they say why?
They said, okay, who are you? We say we are Israelites.
Yeah.
We are the original Israelites.
Yeah.
And we are, who are these bad people?
Yeah.
So they told me, okay, you have to put this in writing and send to so email address.
Yeah.
So we will get back to you.
Yeah.
That's what they told me.
Yeah.
They said, all these things you're saying now, before we allow you entry into this place, this is real. I have the documentation.
Yes.
The written and everything is in my email now.
Yes.
So I went back and I scanned my passport. And I attached my passport. I wrote, I'm from Aguleri, the original Israel.
Yeah.
And I came here to worship with you. Then after some days, they called me and invited me over.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I worshiped with them on the Friday, and on Saturday we went there. In fact, they took me as one of them. They never allow any other person entry except me and my brother. For you to know, they knew the truth.
They know the truth.
They really know the truth.
They know the truth. Oh, yeah. But they're not going to put it out there. They're going to put it out there. Yes.
The existence of a temple with an altar called Obu God in Enugu, Aguleri serves as a tangible cultural link to the memory of God, son of Jacob. The preservation of this temple and its role as a sacred place aligns with ancient Israelite traditions of revering patriarchal origins. It is the palace of the most ancient dynasty in Igbo land and the general collective temple of the descendants of Eri. Circumcision is a key cultural practice among the Igbo, typically performed on the 8th day after birth, paralleling the Israelite commandment of Genesis 17:12. Many Igbo naming traditions involve invoking the name of God, much like Israelite practices. For example, names like Chukwu, meaning God, are central in Igbo culture, akin to Israelite theophoric names. The Igbo also observe some traditional festivals and customs that echo elements of Israelite feasts, such as honoring the harvest season, similar to the Feast of Tabernacles. In Exodus 39:6-7, onyx stones were used to represent the tribes of Israel on the high priest's ephod. In December 1997, a onyx stone at the palace of Obugad was found that bore the Paleo-Hebrew inscription Gad upon it, and the King Solomon Sephardic Federation confirmed the authenticity of the inscription. The repeated visits by Israeli researchers and rabbis to Aguleri and their findings lend credibility to the claim the Igbo make of Israelite artifacts and heritage. This aligns with the biblical description of the stones worn by the high priest in Exodus 39:7. Paleo-Hebrew script has also been found in various places in the Igbo territories of Nigeria. One of these places is the stone throne of Aguleri. Take a look. There's so much more. Henry Kissinger, the former United States Secretary of State, says this about the Igbo in 1969. The Igbos are the wandering Jews of West Africa, gifted, aggressive, westernized, at best envied and resented, but mostly despised by the mass of their neighbors in the Federation. They have fought well by African standards against heavy odds. Their cynical public relations use of the starvation has been brilliant. So far, we have the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim admitting the Igbos are Israelites, so much to the point that they constantly visit them. We have Israelite customs embedded in the Igbo culture. We have theophoric names like the Israelites. We have onyx stones with one of the 12 tribes etched in it. And we have Paleo-Hebrew inscriptions found all over Igbo territory. But that's not all. I'm not finished. In the 18th century, ex-slave Olaudah Equiano of Igbo descent writes in his book The Interesting Narrative of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vasa, the African, that the Igbo descend from the ancient Israelites. Very quickly, most people believe that this portrait is of Olaudah Equiano, but recent information I have received has come to make me doubt this. I'm going to show you a photo of a young Mozart, and I'm going to overlap it with this supposed portrait of Olaudah, and I want to know what you notice. Now let's look at the photo of young Mozart and the portrait they claim to be Olaudah. Unsettling stuff, right? I'll let you be the judge. Anyway, Olaudah Equiano spoke of reading the Bible and noticing that almost all of the traditions of the Israelites were customs that his people did in his homeland, such as circumcision on the 8th day, naming ceremonies, paying the bride price or dowry, the traditional clothing, and several other similarities. It was abundantly clear to him that the Israelite traditions were ingrained into the Igbo culture. The logical conclusion, the Igbo were descendants of the ancient Israelites of the Bible. Number 47. The Yoruba. Sticking with Nigeria and countries like Benin and Togo, let's talk about the Yoruba people, a West African ethnic group constituting more than 50 million people in Africa, over 1 million outside the continent, and bearing further representation among members of the African diaspora, including a large amount of African Americans today. The Yoruba are one of the largest ethnic groups in Africa, and we will prove that they are indeed descendants of the biblical Israelites. The Yorubas are a dark-skinned, woolly-haired race of people living around the region that used to be called Dahomey and Blight of Benin during the slave trade, and it was also referred to as the Kingdom of Judah during the 17th century. Let's take a look at another map from a 1930 book called The Lost Tribes, a Myth, Suggestions Towards Rewriting Hebrew History, written by Alan Howard Godbey. This map shows the Bnai Ephraim, meaning the sons of Ephraim, residing where the Yoruba people are presently located, and Levite cities in what is today's northern Nigeria. Ephraim is one of the 2 sons of Joseph, whom he had with an Egyptian Hamitic woman, making Ephraim one of the 12 tribes of Israel. There's an oral tradition that tells of the B'nai Ephraim who came from Morocco down into the coast of West Africa after the Jews were banished from the Iberian Peninsula in 1492 under the Inquisition, after the defeat of the Moors in Granada by Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon.
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
The Jews lost the peaceful coexistence in Spain that they had received under Moorish rule, likely because the Moors were black just like the Portuguese and Spanish Jews. The Catholics were not as tolerant to religious freedom, so the Jews came streaming into Africa in large numbers due to heavy persecution. Between 1492 and 1692, some of these refugees settled in the location of Lagos and Porto Novo, with a large number being integrated into various tribes in the region. These Iberian Jews, who are believed to be descendants of the Israelites that fled before the Romans in 70 AD, were thought to be joining ancient Hebrews that had been living in Nigeria and other African countries for several millennia. To further solidify the Yoruba's Israelite heritage, let's look at a Yoruba subgroup called the Itsekiri or Isekiri, an ethnic group who mainly inhabit Nigeria's Niger Delta area. The name Isekiri itself is a Yoruba corruption of the word Issachar, one of the 12 sons of Jacob known as Israel. In Bantu languages such as Swahili, we can see the word Isakari, which is the word Isekiri, with different inferred vowels. And as we know, ancient Hebrew was an abjad consisting of only consonants and inferred vowels. This word translates directly to the name Issachar, and as proven earlier, we know that the Bantu has Semitic roots. To further strengthen the case, the Isekiri are from the Niger Delta region, but let's take a look at the actual country of Niger. And there you go, a town called Isakari in the same location of West Africa. I'm not finished. Let's take a look at the Bible again, specifically Numbers 13:7. It says, of the tribe of Issachar, Igal, the son of Joseph. Why does Igal, who descends from the tribe of Issachar, matter? Because another subgroup of the Yoruba are known as the Igala people. How very interesting. So far, we have Levite cities, the sons of Ephraim and possible descendants of Issachar, all in the region of the Yoruba's land. But there's more, of course. Let's take a look at a map showing the global prevalence of circumcision. Red areas have a prevalence greater than 80%. As you can see, a large portion of sub-Saharan Africa, including the West African coast where the Yoruba primarily reside, are circumcised. The Yoruba do indeed practice circumcision on the 8th day, like the Igbo, just like the Israelite mandates. Yoruba children are named based on life circumstances, prophecy, or religious significance similar to biblical practices. Many of the names are theophoric, focusing on giving glory or thanks to the Most High God. Names that begin with Olu or Oluwa are examples of this. As pointed out in several of the previous examples, the Yoruba also practiced dowry or paying the bride price, just like the Israelites of the Bible. It is customary for a new mother to be absent from worship for 40 days after childbirth. If the child is a boy, she takes him for the circumcision on the 8th day and returns home to continue her purification. 40 days after delivery, she comes into the house of God for her thanksgiving and presents her baby, whether boy or girl, before the congregation. This is akin to an old Israelite tradition as seen in Leviticus 12. There are historical accounts that indicate that a Yoruba man would marry his deceased brother's wife, akin to the levirate marriages of the Israelites, but having children with her was optional. In ancient Israel, however, the firstborn from such a union would bear the deceased brother's name. The Yoruba are also a patrilineal people, claiming descent from the father like the Israelites. There are several more similarities that the Israelites and the Yoruba share. But let's move on. Number 48, the Ewe. Now, let's talk about the country of Ghana, specifically the tribe of Ewe. The Ewe's largest population resides in Ghana at around 6 million. However, they are also found in Togo and Benin. Let's talk about their possible Hebrew Israelite heritage. First, by using the paper, The Origins and Brief History of the Ewe People, narrated by Dr. A. Kobla-Dotse. Oral tradition claims the Ewe people were led by an ancestor called Gu, under whose leadership they settled at the delta of the River Nile in present-day Egypt. Other ethnic groups also settled in Egypt then, including the Jews forced by drought in their land of Canaan. There were cultural exchanges among the various people, with groups adopting practices of others with whom they lived in close proximity. The acts of circumcision of male children, pouring of libation, learnt via the worship of the sun god, outdooring of newborn babies, widowhood rites, kingship and burial of kings and chiefs, with their personal effects, some customary practices adopted by the Ewes from the Egyptians and the Jews. They also learnt the composition of long songs from the Jews. When it became difficult living in Egypt, just as the Jews left under the leadership of Moses, the Uwis also left under a leader Me and migrated in a southwesterly direction that brought them into the Sudan, where they made settlement for a while close to present-day Khartoum. The stay there was short due to drought, famine, and slave raids by Arab slave traders who preferred black slaves to their own kind due to their physique and courage. At the time, there were numerous schools in and around Khartoum, and some Uwis took advantage of these schools to become great scholars, merchants, and farmers. The Uwi people decided to leave Sudan, and going southeastwards went into Abyssinia, the present-day Ethiopia. However, the slave raids continued here, and some members were captured and sold and were sent to as far away as India to serve in the courts of their kings and queens. You notice that reoccurring oral tradition from tribes all over Africa making their way to Ethiopia and scattering from there? Very interesting. Let's look at a book named From Milk and Honey to Wood and Water, The Jews of Jamaica by K.P. Barnabas. The book states Togbi Kumasa, a highly respected chief, spokesman, and historian of the Ewe people who inhabit today's southern region of Benin, has stated that the Ewe are Israelites of the tribe of Judah, and that after forming a single entity with the Igbo known as Yuda Eweo, a name alluding to the leadership of the Ewe as the ruling Israelite tribe of Judah, they migrated further west into Africa's Yoruba land before going their separate ways and establishing communities from the Bight of Benin to the Gold Coast, only to be later reunited in bonds on the island of Jamaica. Igbo oral tradition states that the founder of their tribe was a man named Eri, who was an Israelite of the tribe of Gad, and that he was a contemporary of Moses in Egypt who, upon anticipating the Egyptian bondage prophesied to Abraham, left Egypt with an entourage and crossed the Nile into Nubia, where they eventually made their way to southeast Nigeria, establishing Obu Gad, home of Gad, in the Anambra River Valley, considered to be the cradle of Igbo civilization. There they coalesced with the Ewe, a tribal name which is cognate with the Hebrew word Ivri, rendered in English as Hebrew. Let's use another source from Barnabas, his book From the Opposite Side of Kush. The language spoken by the people of Yoruba to the northeast contains some Hebrew words. Nearly all the various languages spoken on the coast are but dialects of the same mother tongue, and this undoubtedly led Snellgrave to deduce an Hebraic origin of these people in the northeast region of Dahomey, whom I will henceforth refer to as Ewe, hence his association of them with Yahu, which was yet another inaccurately anglicized version of the divine name YHWH, the God of the Israelites. Togbi Kumasa, a highly respected chief, historian, and spokesman for the ruler of the Anlo-Yu or Anglo-Yu people who inhabit today's southern region of Benin, has stated that the Ewe are Israelites of the tribe of Judah, descendants of diasporic settlers of Ile-Ife in western Nigeria, who, along with the Bnai Ephraim and Igbo Gadites, migrated further west into Yorubaland, going their separate ways and establishing communities from southeast Benin to southeast Ghana, which is confirmed by the present-day demography of what was once the western frontier of Yorubaland, as today the least of the Ewe populations are in Benin, higher in Togo, and highest in Ghana. So we have the oral tradition, but what about linguistics? Well, as stated before, it is abundantly clear that the language of the Ewe has a Semitic origin and several similarities with the ancient Hebrew. Let's take a look.
The original Hebrew scripts used by Moses and the prophet consist of pictures of everyday objects in the Ewe culture, the Hebrew culture in West Africa. When put together, they form words. When the words are put together, they become statements and sentences. So an ancient Israelite does not have to be literate to read and understand ancient Hebrew. All it takes to understand what it's saying is by looking at the pictographs. As we mentioned in part 2 of this series, the ancient Hebrew symbols are consonants. The modern Aramaic Hebrew had to make up the vowels, what we call nekuds, or the vowel points, the diacritical marks. They are all made up. But how did the ancient Israelite know which vowel to use if the letters were consonants? You see, to a non-Hebrew, the letters appear to be only consonants. But what the ancient Israelite, the Ewes, see is completely different. Both the consonant and the vowels are in the name of the symbol. That means that knowing what the symbol means and their names is very important, because if you get the name of the symbol wrong, the meaning will be wrong and your vowels will also be wrong. If one should Google the ancient Hebrew script chart and compare any two, you will find out they don't agree. The reason is simple, is because They are all based on speculations, not facts. By courtesy of Mawuli Mauvi, using the Anglo dialect of the Eves in Evenigba, let's see the amazing secret of the ancient Hebrew symbol. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a sheep, which is Ale in the Ewe tongue. This is the partial name for the symbol, because if you look carefully, the pictograph does not show a complete image of a sheep. You only see the sheep's head, which is Aleta in the Ewe tongue. Aleta has 3 syllables. Now, the rule. This is the rule. The consonant used is always from the first syllable, which in this case will be AL. The last syllable acts as the vowel, which in this case is the A sound in the last syllable ta. The A sound is represented by the letter A in English. Remember this rule. Put this rule in your spirit. Actually, let me repeat it to clarify it. When you take the first symbol of the ancient Hebrew, its full name is Aleta. Aleta has 3 syllables. The rule is that the consonant used is always from the first syllable, which in this case will be AL, from the owl. The last syllable, which is our focus, acts as the vowel, which in this case is the A sound. The A sound is represented by the letter A in English. This is why if you get the name and meaning of the symbol wrong, you will get your vowels also wrong. Since we now know how to find the missing vowels, let's look at the name of God, reading from right to left. What you have here in the first symbol is a hand flat out fanning air. Air in Ewe, ancient Hebrew, is Yah. As you have realized, that is just the partial name for the symbol. The full name is Yashi, a hand fanning air. If you remember the rule, the consonant used is always from the first syllable. So in this case is the letter Y. The second pictograph is He, which means to pull. That is the partial name. The full name is He. He means to support or block. Look at this photo and you will notice it looks like the symbol. The lady in the photo is using her raised arms to support the load on her head. The scarf is also serving as a cushion. Remember the rule. The consonant used is always from the first syllable. So in this case, it's the letter H in English. The third pictograph has confused Bible scholars for centuries. Some call it Vav, represented by the V in English. Others Wav, represented by the W in English. It's actually both Vav and Wav. The word is V. There is no corresponding letter for V in the English language. It means a gorge, a funnel, a narrow groove. The consonant used is always from the first syllable, as the rule says. So in this case, it's V in the English. The last syllable, as explained earlier, is the consonant H. So we now have the consonants in the modern Hebrew, Yud, He, Vav, He, what we call the tetragrammaton, which is Latin for the 4 letters. So now, which vowels do we use so we can correctly pronounce this name? Remember our rule for the vowels. The last syllable acts as the vowel. I'll repeat that. The last syllable acts as the vowel. When you look or when you take the first 2 symbols of God's name, reading from right to left, you have Yashi and Hehe. They are the letters Y and H, and the last syllable that gives us the vowel is the He sound, represented by the letter E in English. When you apply it, you have Ye. We do same with the last 2 symbols, V and he. The letters V and H. The last syllable that gives us the vowel is the S sound represented by the letter E in English. When you apply it, you have ve. When you put the two together, you have God's name, Yahweh. The text we started with reads, "If my people who are called by my name." The name of God is Yahweh, and the name of his people is Ewe, what is rendered in English as Hebrew. You notice that the name of God's people can be found in the name of God, Yahweh and Ewe. That's the scripture. If my people who are called by my name. Yahweh is the God of thunder and lightning, and we have known him by this name since ancient time, since the revelation at Sinai, way before the missionaries came to Christianize us. We have never forgotten his name.
Certainly interesting stuff to take into consideration, wouldn't you say? I also find it interesting that the later Adinkra scripts, used extensively in fabrics, logos, and pottery, look extremely similar to the early pictograph Hebrew. One last thing I wanted to share, the Iwi and the Ghanaians as a whole are known for their colorful fabrics called the kente cloth, which is speculated to come from the word kenten, which means basket in the Asante dialect of the Akan language. But what I find so interesting is that the Hebrew word for tunic is ketonet.
What's that, brother?
As a matter of fact, the tunic or coat of many colors that Joseph wore is the ketonet basim in the Hebrew. I find the similarity between the word kente and ketonet remarkable, especially considering that the kente cloth is a colorful cloth of many colors, possibly just like the one Joseph wore. Something to think about. Number 49. The Akan. The Akan people are a large ethnic group consisting of many subgroups living primarily in present-day Ghana and in parts of Ivory Coast and Togo in West Africa. It is estimated that they consist of around 25 million people, and it is highly possible that they may have Israelite heritage. First, let's take a look at their oral tradition of their migration. According to Wikipedia, so take this with a grain of salt, Akan people are believed to have migrated from smaller kingdoms in the western Sudan region to their current location around the 11th century. This is reminiscent of the Israelites being scattered out of their holy land in modern-day Ethiopia and entering neighboring countries such as Sudan, where they settled until they migrated once again. Some earlier scholars suggested that the Akan and, by implication, the Ashanti originated in the vicinity of Ethiopia. Very interesting. Let's take a look at connections between the Akan people of Ghana and the Israelites of the Bible. The name Akan appears in the Bible, both being applied to Edomites and Israelites. It suggests that the name Akan is of Semitic origin. The Akan name for Saturday, Mamanida, translates to I am that I am's day, reminiscent of the biblical name of Yah, meaning I am. The Akan refer to God as Kwame, a name given to males born on Saturday, again aligning with the association of Saturday as God's day, the Sabbath. These parallels have led some to propose a shared heritage or cultural exchange between the Akan and ancient Israelites. Many of the Akan practice circumcision, they practice the levirate marriage, they have separation and purification rites, and celebrate the new moon. You get the picture. Number 50. The Ashanti. The Asante or Ashanti people are a notorious Akan subgroup coming from the modern region of Ghana, making around 11 million plus Ashanti people. Let's take a look at their possible Israelite heritage. Obviously, as stated before, some scholars believe that the Ashanti migrated from Ethiopia, eventually making their way to the west coast of Africa, similar to the oral traditions of many African groups around the continent coming out of Ethiopia. The name Ashan or Asan seems to have a Hebrew origin, as there is a city in the region of the tribe of Judah, occupied by the tribes of Simeon also, that has this name. The word itself means smoke. The T-I at the end of Ashanti would mean race of or people of, formulating the meaning people of Ashan. There's more. Among the Ashanti tribe, one cannot help being impressed by the number of customs and practices described and how precise it mirrors that of the ancient Hebrews. For example, the Mosaic law of intratribal marriages, which was devised to preserve the inheritance of the daughters in the tribe and family of their father, finds a close verification among the Ashanti of today. The preserving of certain names in a family is as much sought after by the Ashanti as it was of the ancient Hebrews, as shown in the naming of John the Baptist when the objection was made, "There is none of your kindred that is called by this name." The marriage ceremony of the Ashanti itself and the after-marriage customs has striking similarity between the Ashanti and the Hebrews. For example, 8 days after the birth of a child, the Ashanti mother is considered as unclean. It is only on the 8th day at the Ntetea, the naming ceremony, that the child receives its personal name, and on the 40th day, a further ceremony must be observed. There are also purity laws regarding the menstrual period as talked about in Leviticus. Let's take a look at this drawing by Sir Henry Morton Stanley in the 19th century. This is an Ashanti ambassador wearing an ephod breastplate, mirroring that of the Israelite priests as commanded in Exodus 28:17. If this isn't evidence, I don't know what is. There's a bunch more evidence for all of the tribes and ethnic groups I have spoken about thus far, but I did not want to make this section longer than it already is. Obviously, I have missed many African tribes, and I regret not having the time to talk about Central African tribes, but don't lose hope just yet. I will be making a series going through all of Africa and finding as many ethnic groups that clearly have Israelite tradition and heritage embedded within the culture and identity. I have tons of proofs so far, but I will still need as much proof as I can get, so I want you to first like the video, then comment down below which African tribe or ethnic groups that you suspect may have some Israelite heritage and why you think so, and I'll be sure to investigate and do the research. This awakening is happening worldwide, and Yah willing, we can help these dry bones continue to rattle and wake up before the second Exodus takes place.
The water made me new again, praying I don't backslide. I can't be that fool again. I can't let a highest kingdom slip from my hands. So I'm fighting myself daily like I'm Gemini man. The Lord with me, who can be against me? The Savior picked me to be in a different world, Dwayne the Whitley, I got one shot to get in the kingdom. You can't convince me that I ain't got a shot when I'm shooting like Dirk Nowitzki.